It's coming up to 8 minutes past 8 now, and you're with Good Morning Scotland. Dear Donald, please may we be excused from exiting the European Union on March the 29th. Well, that, in essence, is the thrust of the letter that the Prime Minister will be dropping in the post today, asking the President of the European Union, Donald Tusk, to hit the pause button and allow the UK to delay our departure from the EU.
Downing Street has confirmed that Theresa May has ruled out asking for a long extension, that she'll request only a short delay to the timetable. But whether Europe's leaders will agree when they sit down for their summit in Brussels tomorrow remains to be seen. The French Europe Minister Nathalie Le Seur suggesting patience is in increasingly short supply.
We are ready for a no deal. We have prepared everything we had to. We passed a law, we passed decrees, and it's a choice to be made by the United Kingdom. They have said no to a no deal, and they have said no to a realistic deal. They have to change their mind on one of the two options.
Well, the EU's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, has made it clear the delay won't be approved unless the Prime Minister comes up with a concrete plan to break the Brexit deadlock. Ministers have to present some form of motion to the Commons by next Monday, but the numbers still seem far from assured, and the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn last night made it clear he's ready to pounce.
If the government can't get a majority for its way on Monday, then I think that's the time to challenge this government. The reality is this government has lost its authority, doesn't enjoy the confidence of the House, cannot get anything through. Surely that is the time to step aside and let the people decide on a people's vote, and it's called a general election.
Well, let's discuss this more with two former special advisors. Joey Jones was a former spokesman for Theresa May, and Sonia Sodha, former advisor to Ed Miliband, who's now chief leader writer at The Observer. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Joey Jones, first of all, does Theresa May actually have a plan here?
I think it feels very doubtful, or not a plan that meets the benchmark, the threshold that's been set by Michel Barnier and the European Union, because her plan has been laid out for a long time, which is just to sort of grind ever onwards and to hope that the pressure of the cliff edge would force people to come into line. And it feels like she's sort of run out of road on that. So she's actually throwing away the only leverage that she did enjoy, the cliff edge, in order to put another one in 3 months' time. And it's not surprising, really, that EU leaders are frustrated. I think the next few days, the EU Council is going to be very, very grim and bad-tempered. And if I were Theresa May heading out to Brussels, it would be a very, very uncomfortable prospect.
Well, indeed, Sonia, how does she sell this to the EU 27? Because they've made it pretty clear that they would potentially grant an extension, but they need to know what it's for. And at this stage, that's not clear.
That's right. And I suspect what she'll be saying to them behind closed doors later this week is that if you grant me this 3-month extension, a short extension, it will really increase my chances of getting the deal through. So I think her strategy has always been, as Joey said, to run down the clock. But there's two different sharp choices she could have tried to create for MPs. I think the one that everyone thought she was going for before this morning was between a deal and a long extension. And, people thought that she was going to sort of try and create that sharp choice to bring the ERG, the European Research Group, the Eurosceptic flank of her party behind her, and the DUP, her coalition partners. But actually, what's quite interesting, I think, this morning, is she seems to have gone for a different sort of sharp choice between deal or no deal. And I think if she requests and gets a 3-month extension, I think she probably does have a chance of getting it, because the EU want to avoid no deal almost as much as we do. Then I think what that does is, once we move past the point of European elections and we have to make a decision about whether we're going to participate in European elections by mid-April, if we don't, it's going to be very difficult to extend beyond 3 months. And so that creates a much sharper cliff edge between deal and no deal than we've seen before. So actually, I think she sort of may have changed tack in recent days.
And how much of that change of tack, Joey Jones, follows yesterday's cabinet meeting? Because several of the newspapers today have quotes from Andrea Leadsom in the cabinet meeting. The Daily Telegraph, she apparently said this used to be the cabinet that would deliver Brexit. Now it's not. She complains of them being a Remainer cabinet. Mrs May is not just trying to keep the EU on side, she's trying to keep those people sitting around the table on side.
Yes, and she's trying to strike a balance between two, if you like, factions of the Conservative Party that, broadly speaking, are not reconcilable. So by going for a shorter extension, I mean, she risks the possibility that you might see resignations that have been threatened, let's not forget, on the other side by Remainer cabinet ministers such as Amber Rudd and David Gauke and Greg Clark. I think the more likely risk at this stage is that ultimately, if, as Sonia is saying, this leads us to a situation where you've got a no deal as a realistic prospect, that's where Jeremy Corbyn, as you heard for a moment ago, has a genuine chance of being able to force through a no confidence vote, because there are some on the Conservative side who've made it pretty clear that they would actually be willing to vote against their own party, against the government in a no confidence vote if they were confronted with the prospect of no deal that they simply cannot accept.
Well, what's your sense of that, Sonia? Because, of course, Jeremy Corbyn has been criticised for hanging on to this notion of a general election. People saying, no, that option has gone. You need to back the idea of another referendum. He's been a bit lukewarm on that one.
He has been, yes. And I think Labour will be looking at this and seeing, actually, as Joey said, that the chances of a general election have gone up, because I think Labour's problem up to this point is it's been absolutely inconceivable that either the DUP or members of Theresa May's own party would vote with Labour in a vote of no confidence in the government. But as the choice gets sharper and the cliff edge gets sharper, you could see perhaps how that might happen. Although I would say it would be extraordinary for MPs, either kind of the Remainers in her cabinet or the hard Eurosceptic flank of her party, to vote with the opposition in a vote of no confidence. I think that would be something that, we haven't really seen in British politics before. So I think that's still probably quite a long way off.
And how much pressure is there on Mrs May to stand aside, Joey Jones? Or is there a feeling in the Conservative ranks that somebody else could do better?
Well, I mean, she's been hanging by a thread that has got ever thinner for months and months. In fact, right from the very moment, of course, that she called the general election, and then it went awry. And yet she continues to confound, if you like, political gravity. I think it does demonstrate the fact that there isn't really an obvious other candidate that would be a better option for the party. If that were there, I think she'd be gone in a heartbeat. But ultimately, even those people who have very obvious ambitions to take on the top job, because there's a real beauty contest going on in the Conservative Party at the moment, would much prefer that they come in after this particular deal, this incredibly knotty question is resolved and out of the way.
There's a great deal of brinksmanship going on here, Sonia. We heard there from the French Europe Minister saying that they are preparing for no deal. Michel Barnier saying something similar. But realistically, do you think that that is an option that the EU will countenance?
I think the chances it could happen. I think it's less likely than not. But I think, the reason why the EU is preparing for it, the reason why our own government is saying that they're going to start putting contingency plans into place next Monday, is that it could still happen. We don't know what the EU is going to say about a 3-month extension. And even if they granted us a 3-month extension and it was a sort of sharp cliff edge between deal and no deal, it's very hard to know what happens. So I think that is why no one wants a no deal scenario. Everyone wants to avoid it, whether that's Parliament, the Prime Minister or the EU. But there is a chance that just through cock-up, essentially, we do get there. The other point I would just make is that, around sort of Theresa May's sort of legacy and who comes next, the thing that we have to remember is that the only thing the withdrawal agreement sorts out is the terms by which we leave the EU. There's a huge conversation to be had about the terms of our future relationship. And I think there are some people in Theresa May's cabinet who see that as a big prize. And that's why you see some Eurosceptics willing to back her deal on as long as she gives a reassurance she'll step down, because they want to be in charge when we get to the next stage of this process, which is all about shaping the future relationship.
Thank you both very much for your time this morning, Sonia Sodha and Joey Jones. 8:17.